Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 41. Shatter. The Dragon's Claw was successful for two reasons: the wide range of ninja-related weapons and gear on offer and Takeshi's impeccable service. His passion for weaponry was a tangible force, and his knowledge often resulted in sales for his business and a satisfied customer. Sometimes, listening in on conversations inadvertently led to even more sales, as these conversations revealed information that an enterprising ninja could employ to great effect. All it required was a bit of discretion. So if I wanted to make a smoke bomb that released toad oil, you can make one? Naruto asked. That's right, Takeshi said. You'll just need to supply me the materials. When do you need it? Before noon. Takeshi frowned. I hate to say it, but I'm not sure if I can get it to you on such short notice. Naruto hummed. What other smoke bombs do you have? Takeshi pulled out a box. They were filled with tiny pellets, each a different color from the rest. These are samples of what I have in stock. Are regular smoke bombs not working out for you? They're working great, but I was thinking about other ways to use them. Naruto pulled out a bright orange smoke bomb. What does this one do? It releases smoke filled with capsaicin. In smaller doses, this compound can make food spicy. In higher doses, it can make your eyes water and tighten your windpipe. That's so cool, Naruto said, the excitement in his voice easy to hear. I'll take a set of these, and a set of pepper bombs. Takeshi went into the back of the store. Naruto set his hands on the counter, waiting for him to return. The chance to approach Naruto for a conversation was there for the taking. So Kurenai took it. Even though she arrived after Naruto had, she already had the items she needed. The chance to eavesdrop on Naruto's conversation was too tempting to resist. She just made sure to loiter around the clothing section while Naruto spoke to Takeshi. When Takeshi returned, he had 2 cases containing the smoke bombs Naruto requested. What's the total? Naruto asked. Since Naruto was only buying smoke bombs, the total he had to pay wasn't all that expensive. What surprised Kurenai was how Naruto's lime green toad wallet was overflowing with cash. It made his success tangible. Thanks a lot, Naruto said, taking the cases. Takeshi smiled. It's my pleasure and privilege. Welcome back, and I hope to see you again soon. I'll be sure to come back. He turned around, a detached look in his eyes. Kurenai was in front of him. Hello, Naruto. Yo, Naruto said, apathetic beyond reason. Kurenai smiled. Buy something nice, I guess, Naruto said. He stared at her intended purchases. Buying something for your team. She was reminded of their talk at his apartment, when he asked her about her genjutsu training. He was trying to be civil, and she knew it from the lack of enthusiasm. Was it because of Takeshi's presence? I still do missions with them from time to time, but they haven't been my team in years. Hinata and Kiba are Chunin, while Shino became a special Jonin not too long ago. This is all for me. Shino had been a Chunin for as long as Naruto had. Come to think of it, it was quite fortunate that he wasn't the type to throw a party. If he had been, and it had been on the same day as the party Shikamaru's mother hosted, she'd be forced to neglect Shino. No, not forced, she'd choose to neglect her genin because Naruto was her priority, and she'd make up some excuse to placate Shino and prevent him from being disappointed that his sensei couldn't be there for him. Unlike Naruto, she couldn't waste chakra on shadow clones. Cool, Naruto said, and just like last time, his flippant responses were getting under her skin. He was about to move past her without even bothering to say goodbye. Wait, Naruto, why don't we leave together? I'll pay for my things and join you. It won't take long. Naruto's eyes narrowed, before he shrugged. Hey, Takeshi, where do you keep your sealing scrolls? Takeshi pointed at the clearly labeled, sealing, section. Naruto went there and poked around. He didn't need sealing scrolls. She saw the gesture for what it was, though, so she wouldn't point it out. As Takeshi quickly calculated the price of her goods, Kurenai wondered if it was the right time to ask. She'd planned to do this before entering, but Naruto's presence made her hesitate. Takeshi, do you have an order for a Suma Sarutobi ready for collection? Kurenai asked. This was just a favor for a friend, and Naruto would know that as well. Takeshi raised an eyebrow. I do. Why do you ask? He's currently indisposed, so he asked me to collect his order for him. She pulled out all the necessary documentation from a sealing scroll she held in her pouch, handing it over to Takeshi. Takeshi smiled. All right, I'll bring it out for you. When he left, Naruto walked back to the counter. His face was blank, and if it wasn't for the skin tightening around his eyes, she'd assume that he was completely aloof. Do you have plans for today, Kurenai? Naruto asked, flatly. Too flatly. Now she knew for sure that he was trying to contain his emotions. His technique had improved drastically, but it wasn't enough to fool her. I'm free after 2. I have some admin work I have to finish. I'll see you at 4. We can make it a date. Kurenai frowned. What brought this on? You said you're free. She bit back the urge to scowl. How annoyingly vague. Fine. I'll see you at 4. See you then. Before he could take a single step, Kurenai moved in front of him. Why don't you come after 2, Naruto? Got something to do. He didn't elaborate. There was no way she'd let him leave her hanging. What is it? None of your business, Naruto said. He walked away as if he hadn't shut her down with impunity. What happened to him? I got what you requested, Takeshi said, shaking her out of her reverie. Kurenai put a hand to her temple. Right. Thank you, Takeshi. He looked around his shop, a slight frown on his face. Where did Naruto go? She frowned. I have no clue, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. Kurenai visited the hospital first. Compared to the reports she had to compile, this would barely take any time. Nobody was in to see Asuma. When she reached his room, Kurenai took a moment to relax, detach herself from her worries and her fears. Keeping her thoughts in order was a skill she learned long ago, but they'd been thrown into chaos thanks to Naruto. She was here to see Asuma, so it wouldn't do if she couldn't focus on the task at hand. Being able to do your duty without being compromised by emotion was a skill every ninja worth their salt had to hone, but she'd refined that skill and turned it into an art form. She entered Asuma's room. He was looking at the window from his bed, and she cleared her throat to grab his attention. It was enough. He greeted her with a warm smile. You're a sight for sore eyes, Asuma said. Kurenai smiled gently. I retrieved your order from the dragon's claw. She pulled out the invoice Takeshi gave her, handing it to Asuma. Once you're out of the hospital, it'll be waiting for you at your apartment. Asuma's smile grew. You're a lifesaver. Why did you ask me to do it? The dragon's claw can deliver your orders straight to your place of choice. He arched his head at the chair next to his bed. Why don't you take a seat? Kurenai did, pressing her legs next to each other rather than crossing one over the other as was her wont. Honestly, I just wanted an excuse to see you. Did you think that I wouldn't? Kurenai asked. Even guys like me get a bit insecure. Kurenai smiled. I would have seen you anyway. Music to my ears. His tongue circled his lips. Damn, has it really been that long? What are you talking about? Asuma's fingers twitched. It's been 5 days since I smoked. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Why did you stop? She wasn't fond of smoking in general, but she couldn't begrudge Asuma's vice. My friend Chiraku was killed. Every time I thought about smoking, I remembered him and lost my appetite. A large frown immediately enveloped her face. My condolences, Asuma. If you need someone to talk to, then I'm here for you. Asuma smiled, a bit wistfully. Chiraku was a good man. He made me a better person. I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, and I'm glad that I knew him. I'm also grateful that I'm still here. So am I, Kurenai said. She'd been utterly frightened after learning that Asuma had ended up needing emergency surgery. He was strong, but ever since her friend had died in the land of water, she couldn't help but worry, even if it didn't always make sense to do so. A slight itch brushed her scalp, and she brought up her hand to scratch it. When she moved it back down, she saw Asuma focusing on her wrist. Where did you get that bracelet? Asuma asked. It was a gift from an admirer. She held her wrist up, saw how the gemstones glittered in the morning light. It's very nice, don't you think? It is. Wish I thought of buying you one. Kurenai didn't make a habit of wearing the bracelet around the village. Sometimes, she'd take it with her on a mission, and wear it around Naruto, but most of the time, she kept it at home. The bracelet held a lot of sentimental value. It also attracted unnecessary attention. Since Naruto's return, she'd taken to wearing it as a reminder. It's the thought behind it that I appreciate more than the gift itself. When I got this bracelet, my admirer told me why he gave it to me. I was moved by his sincerity. He chuckled. He must be one lucky guy if he made you drop your guard. I wouldn't call it luck. She gnawed at her lip. Luck was the last thing she'd ever call it. Did you learn when you'll be allowed to leave? No, not yet, Asuma said. He smiled, and Kurenai balked from the hopeful stare he was giving her. When I do leave, why don't we go out for a drink? She frowned. You know what I'm going to say. I know, but I'm not looking for anything serious. Just a chance to celebrate with a good friend. This wasn't Asuma trying to ask her out. She made it clear that she didn't want a relationship with him. However, he seemed to be genuine about wanting to keep things platonic. Would you mind inviting some other friends? If it means spending time with you, then I don't mind at all. Kurenai smiled. She always appreciated how Asuma had taken her rejection in stride, preventing it from compromising their friendship. There were times when she thought about taking time off from her career to pursue and maintain a serious relationship, and to be honest, Asuma might have been a good match under better circumstances. He was a good man and a good friend, and had been ever since they were placed on the same team for their Chunin exams. Even at his worst, when he was brash and foolhardy and suffering under the long shadow his father cast, she still had a soft spot for him. When Asuma left the village, she took some time for herself to figure out what she wanted. None of her relationships ended up lasting. She had some good times, of course, but she didn't want anything serious. Then Asuma returned. His stint with the 12 Guardian Ninja had made him more secure and self-assured, and as they spent more time together, the idea of being with him became more and more appealing. Unfortunately, she couldn't give him what he wanted. She had no interest in following in her father's footsteps and getting knocked up at a young age while she still had aspirations of her own. The time to start a family would come when she became a Jonin. Yet, even after she earned that promotion and established herself as the Leaf's premier genjutsu master, she still wasn't keen on romance. Other duties had come up, and she couldn't let anything interfere. Do you think you could introduce me to that admirer of yours? Asuma asked. Kurenai frowned. I don't think you'd get along. That was a lie, of course, but it hadn't been the first time she lied to someone she cared about. Asuma smiled. Judging from the way you talk about him, I think we'd get on famously. Well, she knew for sure that they'd get along. I'll tell you what, Kurenai said. Once you get out of here, if I can get hold of my admirer, then I'll think about introducing you to. Until that happens, make sure that you put everything you have into recovering from your injury. Understand? Yes, ma'am, he said, complete with mock salute. She gave her oldest friend a parting smile, before walking out of his room, a slight weight loosening itself from her chest. Keeping Asuma out of the loop, preventing him from getting involved in her affairs, she'd made the right decision. It wouldn't do if more people got hurt when it wasn't necessary. On the way out of the hospital, she came across Shikamaru. Morning, Kurenai-sensei, Shikamaru said. Kurenai smiled. Good morning, Shikamaru. How are you doing today? Shikamaru shrugged. Fine as always. You, in good health, Kurenai said. Asuma's ready to see you. Good to know. She appreciated her talks with Shikamaru. He was a fine young man, and it was thanks to their mutual friends that they could develop a cordial relationship. A spark of inspiration stimulated her mind, bringing a question to her lips. Have you spoken to Naruto since he returned? Came back with him. He's the one who saved Asuma-sensei's life. Kurenai's eyes widened slightly. Really? Did he do it on his own? His partner helped him out. And what was his partner like? She couldn't hide her naked curiosity. He shrugged. Again, she was pretty quiet, but she seemed nice. Kurenai wanted to learn all about this mystery person, but she reconsidered. Shikamaru probably didn't know much else, and the Hokage would make her squirm for details. How about Naruto? Shikamaru's eyes lit up. He was doing great. Gave me some great advice. He smiled. I guess he did a lot of growing up while he was away. You know, with the Akatsuki and everything. Kurenai nodded. I suppose he did. Thank you for telling me about him. Any time, Shikamaru said. They went their separate ways. And like clockwork, her thoughts turned back to Naruto. Everyone had their breaking point, and someone as understanding and sweet as Naruto was no exception. That was why she gave him some space, so that when he was ready, they could figure out where to take their relationship. However, this behavior wasn't what she expected from him. Even when he was angry or annoyed, he still treated her with so much respect. But when they talked, he'd been cold, flippant and aloof. If anything, her apology hadn't settled the deep, foul resentment that seethed beneath Naruto's detached facade. Why that was, she didn't know, but from the scant clues she'd stumbled on, she was starting to get an idea of how he had changed over the years. What she wanted to know was, why, and before the day was done, she'd make sure that question was answered. Kurenai had been filled with a manic kind of energy when she started working on her reports, and she'd managed to finish them by 12:30 in the afternoon. Part of that energy was fueled by utter frustration. In a sense, she was channeling Naruto's tendency to put all his extra energy into doing whatever he set his mind to. Naruto's determination was always so endearing, but one thing that never sat well with her was his tendency to bottle up all his anger. For one, it wasn't remotely healthy. Of course, it had helped her get closer to him, but at the same time, there were issues that even she couldn't help him resolve. How could she, when she was perpetuating those issues herself? She sighed, and stood up from her desk. Now that her work was done, she would just have to hand it in and collect her pay. Then, she'd be free for the rest of the day. Since she wasn't managing a genin team, she had an abundance of free time. This was yet another way she served her village, though it was far less messy or complicated. All it required of her was to organize reports concerning internal issues involving the village, and summarize them. Administrative work helped her pass the time whenever she wasn't on a mission. Kurenai left her apartment and walked towards the Hokage admin complex, thankful that she could do her work from home instead of having to man a desk. Part of the perks that came from being such a respected and trusted ninja. She'd put her life, her dignity and her reputation on the line for this village. This was the least she had earned for herself. Handing over her paperwork was a simple process. It helped that she had an amicable relationship with the clerk on staff. On her way out, she passed the Hokage's office. A slight shiver went down her spine, along with some butterflies that kicked up a storm in her stomach. Naruto's back in the village, the Hokage said. When did he arrive? A couple of hours ago. Remember our little talk? I do. Then you know what to do. You'd better not screw this up. Kurenai hadn't screwed things up yet, but it was harder than she thought to follow orders. What didn't help was that Naruto wasn't the same wide-eyed young man who desperately needed some love and affection. Not by a long shot. She still couldn't believe that he'd spoken to her that way. It was one thing to be rejected while they were alone, but she was quite grateful that Takeshi hadn't witnessed her being stonewalled by her apprentice and supposed boyfriend. If only she knew where to start with Naruto's bizarre behavior. But first, lunch. The food and service she was about to experience was just what she needed to soothe her nerves. In less than 10 minutes, she had arrived at Ichiraku Ramen. Good afternoon, the owner, Chuki, said. What can I get for you today? One regular bowl of dipping noodles, Kurenai said. She didn't mind the change in Ichiraku Ramen's menu. The broth was lighter in calories and the noodles were still rich in flavor. Chuki's daughter, Ayame, got to work on her order. It was clear that she'd inherited her father's skill, or at the very least, worked incredibly hard to become skilled at her chosen trade. Kurenai's own father had taught her genjutsu, and she'd taken it far further than he ever had. Perhaps Ayame would do the same. Enjoy, Ayame said, a warm smile on her face. Kurenai took her chopsticks and dug in. She'd started coming to Ichiraku Ramen after Naruto had left the village. It was funny how she'd entered the noodle shop of her own volition without Naruto bringing her over to be introduced. Maybe it was because of how she'd refused to come with him that she went over in the first place, to make up for her mistake. She hadn't mentioned who she was to either of them. It wasn't necessary, and fortunately, neither of them asked questions. It made her wonder if they would be willing to tell her what she wanted to know, and she decided to take her shot after finishing her meal. Excuse me, is something the matter, ma'am? Ayame asked. Has Naruto Uzumaki come here recently? Why are you asking? Chuki asked, in Ayame's stead. Kurenai licked her lips. Some broth lingered there. I used to teach him. He hasn't been around in a long time, and he always liked coming here. It still rankled that he'd tell these two that he'd left and not her, but he hadn't told Kakashi or Anko or Hinata, either. He hadn't even told Iruka Yumino, so he kept his departure on a need-to-know basis. Which made it all the worse. There was no reason why she wasn't included in that exclusive list. He came in yesterday, Ayame said. Did he react to the menu change? Kurenai asked. Yeah. She frowned slightly, almost like she didn't want to be rude. Chuki set a hand on Ayame's shoulder. Why don't you take her bowls, Ayame? No problem, Dad. Ayame grabbed Kurenai's empty bowls and hustled her way to the back of the stand, out of earshot. I don't think Naruto would appreciate you asking about him behind his back, he said. Kurenai frowned. I'm his teacher, not a stranger. If you are, then I suggest that you ask him directly. She swallowed back the impulse to make this noodle shop owner take back his words. He had no right to protect Naruto from her. Fine, I will, Kurenai said, because Chuki still had a point. Did he seem happy to you? Of course he did. He was surrounded by people he could trust. That statement stung, and the man didn't even mean to snipe her. Still, Naruto was happy, which pleased her all the same. She pulled out her wallet and handed Chuki her fee. Thank you. The noodles were excellent. He nodded. You're welcome. Kurenai departed from Ichiraku Ramen. It was clear why Naruto had so much affection for Ayame and her father. They gave him respect and dignity when almost no one else would have earned his loyalty. In the process, they formed a genuine relationship, and were protective of him to this day. About the only thing she didn't like about the noodle shop was that the noodles didn't come with a nice drink. A lemon cocktail would be the perfect complement to her noodles. That said, Naruto might have never been allowed to enter Ichiraku Ramen, and it wouldn't be because he was a Jinchuriki. It always seemed to come down to that. If he'd been born after the Nine Tails attack, or even before then, he'd be a normal child with a loving family. Instead, his parents were gone, and their child was seen as a menace, a ticking time bomb, someone who had to be lied to because of circumstances he never asked for. Kurenai took some time to herself, making her way over to the private clearing. Her shower was the one significant flaw her apartment had. Sometimes, the water didn't heat up. Other times, the water didn't come at all. It didn't happen so often that it became unbearable, but it happened enough that it dampened her mood. This waterfall was always hot, and with a simple genjutsu, she was able to clean herself with complete privacy. If anyone tried to enter the area her genjutsu covered, she could choose to either send them away or keep them rooted to the spot. Then, it was a matter of either letting them see her or placing an image of her choosing in their mind, one that fed on their imagination. As a result, nobody could look at her body without her consent. Kurenai finished her shower and dressed up, thoroughly satisfied. She took the long way around, walking through some of the village's forests. All of her former genin loved nature in some way. Kiba liked exploring it with Akamaru. Shino always enjoyed finding new insects, and Hinata loved immersing herself in all the sensations of the forest. It had been ages since they'd gone on a simple forest hike together. As she grew older, she learned to cherish what relationships she managed to hold onto. She might have been the life of the party, but that was long ago, and her career always took precedence. What sort of legacy would she leave behind, when all was said and done? Professionally, she might be remembered for her mastery of genjutsu and her loyalty to her village. Personally, however, she couldn't allow herself to dwell on that. Eventually, she found herself back in the Leaf Village. There wasn't much else that she wanted to do at the moment, so she decided to return home and prepare herself for her date with Naruto. It was almost 4, after all. However, when she reached her apartment, she felt the telltale signs of a genjutsu in place, and immediately released its hold on her. Naruto leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed. He breathed out and faced her. "You're here early," Kurenai said. Naruto frowned. "Guess so." He made eye contact with her, and for only the second time, Kurenai's breath hitched. Not only was Naruto taller than she was now, he had also grown in other ways. The baby fat in his cheeks was almost all gone. When he wasn't angry, His blue eyes were so dense with emotion that she could gaze into them for ages without ever getting tired. He filled out the orange shirt he wore quite well, and it complemented his black pants. It was unfortunate that he'd completely abandoned the gray clothing she'd picked out for him, but at least he kept some gray in his scabbard. "Where did you learn how to use a sword?" Kurenai asked. "While I was away." More vagueness. In spite of his attitude, Naruto held himself with an unflappable confidence, smoldering with a resolve that most ninja couldn't possibly match. He was strong, capable, self-assured. He was on the cusp of full adulthood, no longer a child, and she could finally be excited by the prospect of being his girlfriend and truly being with him. That was, of course, if he still wanted her. "Will you give me a few minutes to get ready?" Kurenai asked. Naruto shrugged. "Do what you want, I don't care." Kurenai frowned. "Don't talk to me that way. You're not a child anymore, so stop thinking it's okay to throw a tantrum just because you're angry at me." A frown cracked his facade. "Fine, let's talk like adults, then. You know what that means. No lies." Kurenai's brain started to throb. "No lies, huh? What do you mean, no lies? Why weren't you willing to be seen with me?" Naruto asked. She gnawed at her lip. "What do you think?" "A lot of things. Answer the question." She scoffed. Someone was being pushy today. It isn't often that you see a relationship like ours, and people frown on that. When you consider your reputation, it would only lead to more problems for you. There was a good reason why their relationship barely happened. It would be easy for an adult to manipulate a child, even if that child was a ninja. The only solution was time. Once the child ninja grew up, gained some experience and maturity, it would give them more power in their relationship. "Then why would you go out with me in the first place?" Naruto asked. "Why not wait?" Kurenai took a moment to shove her mounting worry to the back of her mind. Sometimes, time wasn't a luxury one could afford. What was necessary became more important than what was acceptable, as harsh as that sounded. "You've been hurt before, and I didn't want to be the one who hurt you by dismissing your feelings. I wanted you to feel like you were valued and loved by someone." Naruto's eyes widened, mouth opening from surprise. Then he glared at her. "Bullshit." Kurenai scowled. "What did you say?" His scowl ripped across his face, shredding his mask to tatters. "If you really didn't want to hurt me, you should have told me you didn't feel the same way. I would have understood, it would have been fine. You say that now, but if you weren't in your apartment, you would have ran away as soon as I turned you down." She gasped. It wasn't what she intended to say, but at the same time, she couldn't take it back. "I'd understand if you gave me time," Naruto said. "Don't tell me I wouldn't have." Kurenai's scowl waned. He'd gone through a lot of rejection in the past, but it was the significance of her rejection specifically that made her fear the worst. "Is that all?" "No, we're not done yet," Naruto said. "Then by all means, continue," Kurenai said. She'd be sure to get what she wanted, as well. "You said you were afraid of yourself, that's why you wouldn't take things any further. Then why did you let things get that far?" Something burned behind her eyes. Spitting in his face would have been less gut-wrenching than what she did to him. "That's my business, not yours." But with how he'd treated her, she wasn't feeling like spilling her heart out to him right about now. "Oh, I get it." Naruto's scowl gave way to a slimy, unsettling smirk. "You're angry." Kurenai grit her teeth. "Of course I am. Why? You can't be mad just because I wanted to keep something from you." "That's exactly why I'm mad," Kurenai said. "How dare you shut me down today? Even if you haven't forgiven me, that doesn't erase everything we went through." Naruto snorted. "I wanted to keep one thing private, just once. So what?" Kurenai frowned. "Was this really so important that you couldn't tell me about it?" "I didn't want to talk about it. It's my secret." More tantrums. This was going nowhere. She needed to turn the tables, and she needed to do it quickly. "Then we understand each other," Kurenai said. "What?" Naruto asked, face scrunching up in bewilderment. Kurenai smirked. "You heard me. I have my secrets, you have yours. If you don't want to tell me, that's okay. I still love you." Naruto took a step back, aghast. "You're lying." Her eyes suddenly widened as she processed what her mouth just uttered. She hadn't planned to say that, not at this time or under these circumstances. What was more disturbing was Naruto's reaction. The way he looked at her, it was like she was holding his heart in her hand, and he was waiting for her to crush it. "Why would you think I'm lying?" Kurenai asked. He wiped his eyes, and when he moved his hand away, his face was like a mask chiseled from ice. "Because you're a liar." She kept her expression equally as cool, to hide how much he'd just hurt her. "I'm not lying, Naruto. I do love you. Why wouldn't I?" Naruto didn't immediately respond. Even his eyes were cold, chilling her to the bone. "You were lying this whole time. You have your secrets, that's fine, I can respect that. But there's a difference between secrets and plain disrespect." "What are you talking about?" Kurenai asked. "I've never disrespected you, Naruto. There's nobody else I'd rather be with than you." "Really?" For a moment, she could see through his mask, see the young man that she hurt, see the hope he held in his heart. "Yes, Naruto." Naruto closed his mouth, and the mask was back up. "I wish I could believe you. I don't know why, but I still like you, but..." She felt a smile cross her face. "Don't worry, Naruto. We're still together. You can trust me." Naruto's eyes flashed red. "Let me finish." "Finish what?" Her smile slipped away, like water. "You can't forgive me. Tell me what I did wrong, Naruto, and I'll do my best to fix it. You don't have to hide anything from me." "What about you?" Naruto asked. "Do you have anything to hide?" Kurenai's indignation faltered. Was he implying? No, he couldn't possibly know. "Answer me." His sudden shout helped her regain her bearings. "I don't have anything to hide." Naruto took 2 steps forward. There was nothing separating them, and the intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. "It's okay, Naruto," Kurenai said. "We'll work through it, together." He pressed his lips. They were thin, but he was good at kissing. "Stop it," Naruto said. "Just stop," Kurenai hissed. "Where the hell is all of this coming from, Naruto? Don't you trust me at all?" Naruto frowned, his eyebrows bunching together. His lip began to quiver, as if he had something else to say. In fact, his entire frame was coiled up, like a wounded animal preparing to lash out. And honestly, it frightened her, that this was the way he acted around her. She looked into his eyes again, hoping for some kind of reprieve, and all she saw was clarity. "The only reason why you ever spent time with me was because the third Hokage told you to." Kurenai's entire world spun, and she grabbed the wall to keep herself steady. She tried to look at Naruto, but she couldn't. He knew what she did. Who told him? How did he find out? Naruto slammed his hand next to hers. "What's the matter, Kurenai? Trying to find another lie?" Kurenai bared her teeth. "Get away from me." "No, you don't get to push me away this time." She pushed off the wall and brushed past him, taking her key and trying to open her door, but she fumbled with the lock. She couldn't do this. This wasn't supposed to be happening. "Look at me," Naruto said. Kurenai turned, and she was in between her front door and Naruto. She was trapped, unless she wanted to fight her way out. Her breaths were coming out ragged, unsteady. It was too late. No, this wasn't lost, yet. This wasn't the time to be freaking out and panicking like a baby. She had to control herself. That was what she was good at, controlling her image, how she presented herself. "When did you find out?" Kurenai asked. "Before I left with Master Jiraiya." And now she knew why he was acting so strangely, because his world was shattered, and he'd been living with the remains for years. "That long?" Kurenai asked. "I wanted to confront you the moment I found out, but you weren't in the village. I was pissed, but in hindsight, it gave me a lot of time to think about why you would do this. You didn't have to date me to fulfill your mission, but you did. You kept this from me even though you couldn't have kept this up forever." "So?" Kurenai asked, one last ounce of defiance stirring her forward. "I never lied about anything else. Everything I said to you, I meant with all my heart. None of this changes how I feel about you." Naruto frowned, yet for some reason, he seemed to be at ease. "I know, and honestly, it confused me and scared me. But I realized something. None of this changes what you did." Kurenai frowned. "I know. Give me a chance, please. I might have, if I met you that night, but I won't. I'm done being your boyfriend." Kurenai stared at him, a blank look enveloping her face. "You're done?" It wounded her so deeply that she just wanted to collapse to her knees, but she could endure. She could live with that. I can't trust you anymore. I guess you can't do your mission if I want nothing to do with you, huh? She looked at her bracelet, and chose to stand up to her full height. She'd face Naruto with what little dignity she still had left. I'm still your teacher, mission or no mission. Naruto smiled, and it was so sincere that she wanted to wither up and disappear. And I'm still your student. I appreciate all the time we spent together. But I think that it's time I moved on. He stepped back. Goodbye, Kurenai. With one last look, he nodded to himself and walked away, so far away that she couldn't reach him, even if she tried. Kurenai breathed in deeply, trying to find some tether to calm herself down before she lost it. Nothing was going her way, and worst of all, it all seemed inevitable. But there was no use in grieving outside, in public. She opened her door with ease, now that she wasn't smothered from guilt. She walked inside her apartment, closed the door behind her, then trudged over to her couch and dropped into it. She stared at the ceiling, and for a long time, she let the conversation play itself in her mind like a repeating videotape. Kurenai could have told Naruto that the mission had been cancelled, but it wouldn't undo what she did. He had no reason to trust her, no reason to ever associate with her. She'd broken his heart, betrayed his trust, and she couldn't fix it, not the way she wanted to. All she was left with now was a pile of regrets, and she had no one to blame for her misfortune but herself. Chapter 42. Going Forward. As Naruto left Kurenai, a smile spread across his face. It finally happened. Naruto did what he set out to do, on his terms. There was no other choice he wanted to make, and even if everything hadn't gone exactly as expected, he couldn't be happier with what he'd accomplished. One down, one to go. For his next meeting, Naruto planned to take a different approach. To do that, he needed to get his facts in order. He was confident he'd succeed, but he wanted to guarantee his success, not rush in on impulse. Chances were that he wouldn't get the reaction he desired if he did, or he'd get caught up in his feelings again. Tons of pent-up emotion churned through his brain, but Kurenai's hold on him was slipping. In time, it would become nothing more than a memory. Now that he was finally on his own, Naruto chose to take a walk. He had time to kill before dinner. It was kind of strange, coming to this point after so long, after everything that had happened. He'd fixated on this meeting, imagined every way it could have gone, and now that it was over, he was adrift, floating in an ocean filled with possibilities. In a way, he did appreciate having this time to just process everything. He'd grown a whole lot, and he had definitive proof of that fact now. Judging from some of the looks he was getting, he wasn't the only one who noticed his change. He still couldn't believe that there were villagers who chose to greet him with smiles or respectful nods. Not everyone was as welcoming, but it was so much better than it was when he left the village. All of that hatred was hard to endure, but even at his lowest moments, Naruto couldn't find a reason to turn on the people of the Leaf. Many people hated him for something he never asked to have, but if they never took the chance to know him, they'd be stuck seeing the burden instead of the person. Choosing not to lash out against that enmity proved to be the right choice. There was no doubt about that. He got a lot further by proving himself through his actions instead. Still, what in particular had changed while he was away? Was it his reputation as the Blade of Illusion? Was it his absence that made people reflect on their feelings? Naruto wasn't sure what it was, but he did like seeing it, even if it wasn't something he needed to validate his sense of worth. He had all the respect and acknowledgement he could ever want. Best of all, that acknowledgement wasn't some lie or illusion created to keep him loyal. It was real. On the way out of the market district, Naruto passed a flower shop. He recognized the name and even one of the chakra signatures meandering about. The flower shop had all sorts of plants and flowers inside, from roses and tulips to herbs like basil or coriander and even plants that were kept in glass cases. Ino came to a stop in front of him, dressed in an orange shirt and white pants. "What brings you here, Naruto?" Ino asked. "I was in the area," Naruto said. Ino smiled. "Great. I wanted to find you, but I couldn't find the time. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't thank you for saving Asuma-sensei's life." Naruto didn't smile. "I was just doing what anyone else would do." While he would have saved Asuma every single time, his priority was always to thwart the Akatsuki whenever he got the chance, make them think twice before they tried to mess with him or anyone he came into contact with. You still did it. Ino was staring at him, as if she was waiting for some kind of response. Naruto could have brushed her off, but she truly seemed to be thankful, and he wasn't the type to ignore any kind of sincerity. You're welcome. He let out a slight breath. What's going on with you? Ino shifted her feet. I'm busy working at the moment, but I've made some plans for tonight. Like a date? Nah, not a date, unless you're available, that is. Naruto's eyebrows rose. You're actually interested. I've been interested for a long time, Ino said. Her smile had turned coy. What was that word? Yeah, coquettish. That was news to him, but there were a couple of signs that came to mind, ones he dismissed because it didn't seem possible. It still didn't change a thing, though. Well, I'm not. I've got plans of my own. She chuckled. I thought so. A brief pause emerged, before she rushed to fill it. I owe you an apology, for how our date went. Her smile changed into a pensive frown. I should have been upfront about what I wanted instead of trying to trick you into telling me about Sasuke. I didn't really think about how you'd take it, and that wasn't remotely fair to you at all. Not only that, I said such mean things to you just because I was angry. I'm sorry, Naruto. Naruto smiled. It's okay. I forgive you. Her smile returned, in full bloom. It wasn't the first time he made amends with someone who tricked him, so moving on wasn't hard to do at all. Not only that, there was no need for him to hold a grudge on Ino. She apologized, she meant it, and he'd already made peace with what she did. He'd dealt with much worse. I'm sorry, too, Naruto said. I shouldn't have acted the way I did on our date. I just had a lot on my mind and I took it out on you. Apology accepted, Ino said. That date was a real doozy, wasn't it? It was probably the worst first date in the history of first dates, Naruto said, though there wasn't much bite to his bark. The fact that they could laugh about it was proof they moved on. So, what have you been up to lately? Ino asked. Training, hanging out with my friends, the usual stuff, Naruto said. I've bet you've been training really hard. Ino put her hands on her hips. You noticed, didn't you? How could I not? She gave him another coy smile, batting her eyelashes. I'm so flattered. I've got Sakura to thank for inspiring me to improve myself. You've seen her, right? Naruto nodded. We were on a mission more than a week ago. She was really strong. Right. She was working herself to the bone to become a stronger ninja, and I couldn't fall behind. Between you and me, I think she was working too hard. How do you mean? Ino smacked her lips together. She was literally working herself to the bone. I get wanting to surpass your limits, but she was pushing herself way too far, and she lashed out if someone tried to help her. He wondered if she knew what was driving Sakura, why she'd push herself to the brink if it meant she could stand on her own 2 feet. Did you try to help her? Her blue-green eyes flashed. Of course I did. I made her take care of herself, and every time she was feeling down, I reminded her that there were more things to look forward to than her goal. Naruto smiled. Sometimes, you need someone to give you some perspective. Her shoulders seeped downward, like tension was escaping her frame. I totally agree. Ino looked at her feet, twirling her ankle for a bit. Personally, Naruto hoped no one else came around. He got why Ino's father was so apprehensive about him associating with his daughter, but that didn't mean he wanted to see him. There would be nothing worth talking about. Hey, Naruto, where's that partner of yours? Ino was staring right at him, fixing him with an unusually intense stare. You mean Samui? She went home earlier today. Why do you ask? I was just wondering about her. The way she was looking at you, I thought you guys had something going on. Naruto frowned. It's not like it matters, does it? She's from the hidden cloud. That's not a big deal. Look at Shikamaru, he always spends time with this girl from the hidden sand. Tamari. Yeah, Ino shut her mouth, opened it. Wait, you sound like you know her. I know you fought her, but Shikamaru fought Karui from the cloud and he's never seen her since. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. I became good friends with Tamari while I was training in the hidden sand. Ino blinked. Huh, well, my point is, Shikamaru didn't let his distance from the hidden sand keep him from getting closer to Temari, so if you really think that this Samui is the right girl for you, you'll find a way to her. It wasn't that simple, and yet Ino was suddenly invested in his relationship with a woman she'd barely spoken to. Hey, why are you getting so fired up about this? She clenched a fist, held it to her heart. Love always finds a way, Naruto. I know you have a lot of love to offer, and I really believe that you deserve a chance to be with someone who truly loves you. Naruto flinched, before a smile blossomed on his face. Thanks, Ino. You too. Ino grinned. Naruto was looking forward to having dinner at the Nara residence, managing to squeeze in some meditation before he went over. When he arrived, he got to feast. Rice, potatoes, beef and stir-fried vegetables were presented in a mouth-watering bundle and every bite melted in his mouth. What conversation there mostly involved casual topics. Naruto told Shikamaru about his meeting with Ino. He'd known that they'd gone on a date gone wrong, but Naruto hadn't elaborated on it and Shikamaru hadn't cried. It turned out that Shikamaru had visited Asuma in the morning, and apparently, Kurenai had asked about him. Good to know, Naruto had said. He'd told Shikamaru that Kurenai was training him in genjutsu long ago, but Shikamaru only knew that they were teacher and student, not anything more. There wasn't much point in telling him now that it was over. Since he was a master of genjutsu, he didn't have an official reason to associate with Kurenai, and if he was asked about it, he'd just say that he hadn't taken the opportunity to see her. Maybe he could tell him the whole truth one day, when they were alone and it ever became relevant. Naruto decided to share another secret. He pulled out his picture of his parents, perfectly preserved in an orange scroll, and showed it around. Why do you have a picture of the fourth Hokage with you? Shikamaru asked. Naruto smiled. Because he's my dad. That's my mom next to him. Shikamaru looked at the picture, then glanced at Naruto. I never would have guessed it. Why did it take you so long to find out? I asked. Naruto said, trying to hold on his smile. I didn't get an answer. Your mother looks a lot like you, Yoshino said. When did you find out about your parents? A few months ago, Naruto said. My godfather told me who they were. It's certainly an interesting legacy to live up to, Shikaku said. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. You're saying that like you didn't know who Naruto's dad was. I didn't, though I had my suspicions. Naruto bristled. If Shikaku, the Jonin commander of the Hidden Leaf didn't know, then what made this worthy of being such a tightly guarded secret? Even after hearing Jiraiya's explanation about information and power, he still believed he deserved to know who his parents were. Shikamaru opened his mouth, but Yoshino beat him to the punch. What matters is that you know where you came from, Naruto. I'm certain your parents would be proud of the man you've become. Naruto's cheeks grew warm. Thanks, Yoshino. Yoshino smiled. Did your godfather tell you what your parents were like? Naruto went on to tell his surrogate family everything Jiraiya told him about his parents, and he managed to weave in a couple of tales Kakashi had told him about his dad as well. He felt a surge of pride from being able to share how awesome his parents were with some of the people he cared about. This was why he wanted to share this secret, because he could trust the Naras. He wouldn't scream it from the rooftops, but it was his secret to share. Minato and Kushina were his parents. One thing was for sure, he needed more stories. He wanted to know as much as he could about his mom and dad. It would be nice to meet them, Yoshino said. Yeah, Shikamaru said. It's not just because your dad's the fourth Hokage, they seem cool. Naruto grinned. I'd really like to meet them, too, and introduce you guys to them. Eventually, Naruto finished telling his story and his dinner along with it. He was thoroughly relaxed in a way he hadn't been in a long time. There were times when he felt at peace, but lingering worries always lurked beneath the surface. Now, those worries were almost non-existent. Night had fallen over the Nara residence, and Naruto took the time to play some shogi with Shikamaru on the porch outside. He was a bit rusty, but he got into the groove in short order. While he couldn't pull off a win, he did push Shikamaru to use his thinking pose at least once, which was practically a victory in itself. When am I ever going to beat you? Naruto asked, after losing for the 5th time in a row. Shikamaru smirked. When you want to win so badly that you'll keep on pushing forward even when your back's against the wall. Naruto growled underneath his breath. Turning his words back on him was a low blow, but well, Shikamaru was a good listener. There is value in a tactical retreat, Shikaku said. He was leaning on the pillar next to them, arms crossed. Wanting to win is good and all, but you shouldn't be compelled to make a rash decision just to avoid losing. I guess, Shikamaru said. Hey, Dad, you want to face Naruto? Shikaku smiled. What do you say, Naruto? Naruto returned the smile with one of his own. You're on. Shikaku took his son's place, and when Naruto played, he considered every single move he was making. He noticed how Shikaku was mostly reacting to his moves, occasionally placing a piece in a position that might have led to a punishing counterattack. The thing was, he never followed up on it. Naruto could have easily taken those pieces, but that would mean he had to adjust his plan, and he was already enacting it. So Naruto pushed forward, not wanting to commit everything to one overwhelming offensive. He saw how keeping a few pieces in reserve just in case could benefit him, and for a brief period of time, Naruto thought he was actually getting close to winning. Then Shikaku decided he had enough of reacting and crippled Naruto's offensive. Naruto clamped his jaw shut. Don't take it personally, Naruto, Shikamaru said. Dad almost never loses. Who beat him? The first Hokage. The third, Shikaku said. He started to rearrange the pieces, talking as he did. You had a few good moves, but you showed me a bit too much respect. Take the opportunities you get whenever they come, and don't be afraid to take those risks if you can afford to take them. I might be able to reclaim what I lost, but you still would have put me at a disadvantage. In a real fight, he needed to learn how an enemy fought before he could dismantle their offense, or else he might get caught off guard and risk hurting himself. That being said, he could see where Shikaku was coming from, and he planned to put that advice into action as soon as he could. Want to play again? Naruto shook his head. Can I talk to you about something else, first? Shikaku set his hands on the shogi table, let go of the pieces and stared at Naruto. Shikamaru had inherited his father's eyes, but the scars on his face and his wizened stare gave Shikaku a different sort of presence, born from decades of hard-earned experience and wisdom. Shikamaru, mind giving us a minute? Shikamaru shrugged. Knock yourselves out. He walked inside the house, leaving Naruto alone with Shikaku. The stars were brightly shining above, and the moon was nearly full. It was a really peaceful night tonight. Naruto took a moment to gather his thoughts. Why do you think that keeping my dad's identity a secret was necessary? Shikaku didn't respond. Naruto kept quiet, waiting for him to open his mouth. If I had to guess, it was done to protect you from outside threats. As for why you didn't know, it was most likely to protect you. You'll have to ask Lord Third. If news spread about the Yellow Flash having a child, people would be flocking to our village to find out who it is, and once they see you, they'll see that you have his eyes and hair and assume you're the child they were looking for. If you didn't know, you wouldn't be able to confirm their suspicion. He wanted to say that he'd fight back, but he'd probably be a little kid or something. At least he had an Anbu squad protecting him during that time, but even they weren't invincible. You really think they'd take that risk? You've heard of what happened to Hinata Hyuga. Not directly, but yeah, exactly. They failed, and used the threat of war to demand restitution. It was only a stroke of luck and a bit of deception that kept them from achieving their goals. It could be agents from the Hidden Cloud or Hidden Stone, even someone affiliated with the Akatsuki. Once they got a good look at you, they would assume you were related to Lord Fourth in some way, even if your heritage was unknown to them. Having blonde hair and blue eyes wouldn't be sufficient evidence to prove your heritage, but it would be enough to take a risk on an orphan child. On top of that, you're the Leaf's Jinchuriki. They could choose to kill you to get revenge for what your father did or eliminate a potential threat, and if they found about the nine-tailed fox, they could kidnap you so that you'd serve their interests. Naruto frowned, mulling it over. There wasn't a single moment he could remember where he was ever in true danger from a foreign enemy, so there might have been some truth in Shikaku's speculation. The fact that he could say that he wasn't ever in danger meant that the third really was working to protect him from dangers he couldn't even perceive. Still, it was only speculation, and while he was beginning to make sense of this decision, he would have to ask the old man to know if Shikaku was on the mark. You know what's funny? The whole reason why the Hidden Cloud visited us was because the Raikage's best scout saw me on a mission. Me being skilled at genjutsu was just a pretense. Shikaku frowned. Makes me wonder why he didn't tell you about your parentage once you became a genin. Did he tell you about the 9 tails? I found out from a traitor who was trying to use me to steal the scroll of seals. He nodded, stroking the hairs on his chin. I remember that. Like I said, you'll have to ask him. It's the best way of learning the truth, and you've proven your loyalty to the hidden leaf. If that's not enough to satisfy him, I'll vouch for you. Thanks, Shikaku. He sighed. Since he was asking questions, he might as well ask another one, just to make sure of things. You know, the day after I became friends with Shikamaru, he told me that I could come over to meet you in Yoshino. Why would you want me to visit you so soon? You became friends with Shikamaru, and I invite all of Shikamaru's friends over. He idly wondered if Tamari had been invited once Shikamaru became her escort, but Shikamaru bringing a girl home to meet his parents would probably be something completely different. So you weren't asked to do it? I wasn't. Why not earlier? I used to hang out with Shikamaru in the academy, you know. There was a lull that emerged in their conversation, and in it, Naruto could see something like regret appear in Shikaku's eyes. I considered it, he said. I never held a grudge against you for what you contained, and I was never afraid that Shikamaru would be affected by your reputation. His eyes narrowed. Not everyone shares your opinion. A frown creased Shikaku's face. Inoichi wanted to protect Ino from anything that could harm her, and what you represented made him afraid. For what it's worth, he came to regret what he said to you. Naruto frowned. That's nice to hear, I guess. But you're not like him. In that regard, I'm not. However, before I decided to do anything, I asked Lord Third about how you were faring. He told me you were being taken care of, and I decided to take him at his word, because even if you were an outcast, I could tell that he truly cared about your well-being. When he found out you were coming over, he told me to carry on. His frown deepened. If he cared, if he really cared, he could have adopted him or something, prove that he wasn't just some shogi piece meant to be used and discarded. That's all. That's all. That was pretty much what he thought, that their relationship wasn't born from a mission, but confirming it was always the right move. Would it change anything if Lord Third told me to watch over you and made it a mission? Shikaku asked. Naruto's first instinct was to say yes to Shikaku's question, but that was just him being biased. If it was to keep me loyal to the village, then I'd say yes, because you'd be manipulating me for no good reason. If it was just to see how I was doing, then I'd say no, because you wouldn't be ordered to make me feel like I was part of your family. Shikaku was silent, shutting his eyes for a moment that grew into 2. He opened them. Why are you asking me all of this? Naruto pushed a shogi piece around. I just wanted to hear a different perspective. There's a lot of stuff that's happened, and I want to understand it all instead of lashing out. I thought so. If you had a problem with being a ninja, you would have let it slip. What matters to you is the intent behind a mission and how the mission was carried out, not only the fact that the mission exists at all. Naruto blinked, before a smile pulled his lip up. You nailed it. Even if he did have a problem with the ninja system, he probably wouldn't be able to retire and live as part of Koyuki's production staff or become a ramen chef or Samui's masseuse. It was a good thing that he loved being a ninja. He loved improving himself and he loved testing himself on missions and proving his worth as a shinobi. Loyalty missions and other cloak and dagger operations like it never sat well with him, though. What was the point of targeting people who served their village without question and swallowed their grievances because they didn't want to succumb to hatred? If it was to protect those people, then maybe he'd understand, but he was loyal. He always had been, even when he was given reason not to be. Fortunately, he'd never been asked to take a mission like that. He had no problem with Sarutobi asking Kurenai to keep an eye on him, since her teaching him genjutsu or being his friend and mentor would be done of her own volition. The problem was that she chose to become his girlfriend just to secure his loyalty to the hidden leaf, and made up some excuse of wanting to spare his feelings. It was so screwed up, and it was the fundamental reason why he had such a hard time forgiving her. There was no way he could trust her now, because she was a master of illusion and knew him really well, meaning that he'd have no way of knowing where the lies ended and the truth began. With all this in mind, he knew that Shikaku's insights reinforced the thoughts Gaara had shared with him. All he knew was that he was seeing this from a victim's perspective, and if he was going to confront Sarutobi, he needed to broaden his horizons, see the forest instead of merely the trees in his way. That was the only way he'd get the answers he wanted. Anything else? Shikaku asked. Nah, that's all. Naruto smiled, trying to convey his gratitude in the warmth of his smile. You've taught me a lot, Shikaku. It means a lot, more than you'd know. I'm just glad to help you find your way. Shikaku chuckled. Life isn't perfect, but if we learn from our mistakes and take each day one step at a time, that's how you make the best of what you have. By the time Naruto reached the red light district, he felt a fatigue that soaked his mind and his body. He'd gone through quite a lot, but he'd gained something from every single interaction he had. He fought the Hokage and held his own, employing all sorts of tactics both new, like the smoke bombs he bought from Takeshi's shop, and old. He got an apology from Ino and apologized in turn, spent time with the Nara family and got valuable information from Shikaku. Most of all, he broke up with Kurenai. He'd wanted to piss her off so that she wouldn't be on top of her game, but she was able to flip the script on him. She was good, really good, and he was kind of amazed that she had a good answer for practically every question he threw at her. Fortunately, he was able to realize her plan and end things on his terms. Unfortunately, he hadn't left the conversation completely unscathed. On top of not confessing to the truth until he forced it out of her, Kurenai said that she loved him. Honestly, that was terrifying. What he didn't get was why Kurenai would even say that she still cared about him, mission or otherwise. She was a professional, and didn't that mean that she could detach herself from her emotions to fulfill her mission? It was frustrating that she wasn't willing to tell him the whole truth, but it was ultimately a moot point. He wasn't interested in being part of this charade any longer, and nothing she said or could say would change that fact. In an odd way, he was only able to realize that because Kurenai kept on acting like she actually cared about him. Even if he'd never met Samui, he'd still be fed up with Kurenai's manipulation. Knowing that there was another woman who appreciated him made the decision easier, even if he was doing this for his own sake. As he approached his apartment, he heard a melodious voice coming from one of the establishments in the red light district. It was almost intoxicating. Now that he was single, he could do whatever he wanted, even lose his virginity if he felt like it. It wasn't like he was saving himself for the love of his life, but he preferred to have a real connection to another woman before he made love to them, and with how Kurenai had scarred him with her rejection, he wasn't willing to open himself up to forge that bond. Samui gave him the hope and confidence he needed to bring down his walls, and if she was around, he'd probably celebrate with her and give her what she wanted. However, she was gone, so he'd have to wait. This fatigue wasn't going away and he wasn't willing to sleep just yet. Fortunately, there were ways to relieve that tension, and if he played his cards right, he'd be able to sort things out for himself. He'd never actually been inside this building when it was open for business, and it was packed with both ninja and civilian alike, pretty girls in kimono on hand to serve the excited customers. She stood on a wooden platform in the center of the room. Fingers splayed across a silver microphone as she sang about trying to move on from unrequited love. There was someone playing an instrument behind her, but it was easy to forget he was even there when all eyes were fixed on the singer pouring her heart into her song. Her dark brown hair was tied up into a bun that was pinned by 2 golden needles, but when it was loose, it would fall down her shoulders, not a single hair out of place. The blue kimono she wore covered her body, but every now and then, her ankles or wrists or even the barest hint of cleavage would be exposed. The singer was about to finish her set, and when she did, she opened her blue eyes to a round of stirring applause. She was still as mesmerizing as ever. "Thank you," she said. "You're all too kind." They made eye contact, and a small smile graced her lips. She called a young woman with strawberry blonde hair and whispered something in her ear. Moments later, that same young woman was at his side. "Good evening," she said, inclining her head. "Masane will visit you after she has completed her set. Allow me to escort you to a private room where you can wait for her." He stared at Masane, who had started singing another song. This one seemed to be about a young woman finding out that her lover had come back home from war. "You will be able to hear her from the room." He smiled. "Let's get going." It wasn't long before the young woman, Yumi, directed him to a rather familiar room, one with bright red lighting and a dark red sofa set next to a black table. Would you like anything to eat or drink? Yumi asked. No, thank you, Naruto said. Yumi granted him a demure smile. Very well. Feel free to ring the bell if you are in need of any refreshment. Thank you. After Yumi left, Naruto closed his eyes and listened to Masane's song. There were speakers in the room that let him hear every word. It filled his senses, and with his sensor, he could see her energy pulsate. That was how he knew that she was coming to this room after she was finished with her performance. Good thing he was already prepared. He was clean, having taken a shower before eating dinner. All of his gear except for a couple of scrolls was safe at home, and while he was dressed in his regular clothing, they were clean spares rather than the clothes he wore during his noontime fight. Masane entered his room, a dazzling smile on her face. He was already on his feet to greet her properly. It's been a long time, Naruto, she said, in her sweet, husky voice. She made her way across the room, going around the table. Naruto smiled. You were great tonight. Thank you. How have you been? Done anything cool? I've been fantastic, she said. I've made some renovations to this building and adjusted my schedule to accommodate the growing demand for live entertainment. I've also brought in some new hires to assist me. Yumi is one of them. Naruto's smile grew. Sounds great. What about if someone wants to hire you as an escort? Do you still do that? I do. Why? Are you interested? Naruto chuckled. I am in need of your services. She looked at him, analyzing him from head to toe. You've become quite the looker since we've last met. It's been a long time. His smile faded. I didn't mean to avoid you, but I got a girlfriend and I didn't want her to know I was spending time in a place like this. A girlfriend? Were you afraid that I'd steal you away from her? Naruto shook his head. I just didn't want to make any trouble for her. She didn't stop smiling. I understand, and I don't blame you. His smile came back. Thanks. Does your girlfriend know that you're here now? I broke up with her. Her eyes widened a bit. May I ask why? It's why I wanted to come and see you. In that case, take a seat. Once he did, she followed suit. How can I help you tonight? Naruto curled a fist, then uncurled it. How do you manage being an escort? Is your client able to trust you even though he knows it's not a real relationship? Masane chuckled. Those are some interesting questions. I'll do my best to answer them for you. For one, even though money is involved, our relationship is still real. I work hard to ensure that my client is fully aware of what our time together will entail before any deal is made, to make sure we both enjoy ourselves as much as we can. One way I do that is by establishing boundaries. I won't spend time with my client outside of our pre-scheduled times or when I'm not working. If a potential client is in an established relationship, I won't go through with any deal unless their partner consents to our coupling. I am also allowed to end things at any moment, although I rarely have to do so during a date. There are other rules, but these are what I feel are the most important ones. Naruto blinked. That sounded like a lot. Are your clients fine with all these rules? They are. I've had to make some adjustments over the years, but they've worked quite well for me. Can they try to force you or any of your employees into doing what they want you to do? Fortunately, I've rarely had to deal with such incidents after I established myself. That being said, in the times that I have, I've hired ninja to solve this problem. Some of my employees are trained ninja, as well. So far, so good. He'd wanted to ask Masane because she wasn't connected to his life as a ninja, and she'd helped him out in the past with his love problems. Masane was also all business-like while she answered him, which was exactly what he wanted. What happens if a client gets attached? Naruto asked. Masane sighed. It's happened before. I've tried dating a client before, but it didn't work out because my business was my priority and my client wanted me to give up being an escort. I wouldn't do so, so we parted ways. I never really thought of dating anyone since, I was too busy working. It sucks that you had to deal with that, Naruto said. Her smile turned wistful. It did. That's why those boundaries are in place, to protect myself and my client from harm or heartbreak. It's better for the both of us if our relationship is transparent, to mitigate as much attachment as possible. I never guarantee love, and it always hurts when you feel like your trust was betrayed. Naruto frowned. It hurts a lot. That's why I broke up with my girlfriend. She was basically using me, even though she didn't need to date me to keep my trust. The thing is, she got attached to me. I always thought she'd be able to think of it as just a job or something. Her ruby red lips were pulled into a frown. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that, Naruto. Thanks, but it's over. Did your girlfriend admit that she was using you? No. I told her what she did, and she still insisted that nothing changed, that she still cared about me. She kept on saying that she never wanted to hurt me, that she wanted me to feel loved and wanted, but she couldn't admit that she was manipulating me. His voice was starting to rise by the end, but he caught himself. Masane reached out for him, her soft, smooth hand outstretched. He took it, and felt her squeeze, the heat from her skin merging with the warmth emanating from deep within him. I don't know your girlfriend, but from what you're telling me, there are two possibilities. Either she got trapped in the lies she told herself, or she was being sincere when she told you that she cared about you. Did she get cold feet at some point during your time together? Naruto's heart skipped a beat. She did. Masane's eyes lit up. As I expected, her feelings for you most likely clashed with whatever her goal was. You cannot afford to forget why you're doing what you do, or else you will be lost. Now he knew why she reacted so violently to getting intimate with him. What he didn't get was why she didn't just tell him about it. Was there something else that was driving her decisions? It'd be much better than being vague about her choices. In the end, it didn't matter. It couldn't matter. I still don't regret what I did. Good. The most important you could have done is make it clear where you stand. Her blue eyes shimmered. Cherish the time you spent together, but don't let it chain you to the past. Can you do that? He'd be fine without Kurenai in his life. He was worthy of love and being loved, and he knew that he could find that love in his life. Yeah, I can. I know I can. Masane smiled. That's what I like to hear. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.